Good evening, YouTube family. Tio here with Simplistic Fishing. Hey, tonight it's time to do another lake breakdown. I actually did some live video for you this weekend. We had a really good day out on Lake Tawakoni. Ended up with close to 16 pounds, 15.7 pounds for our best five. We were just doing a little competition against Jason and Jackson just to see what really wasn't even competition. We were just trying to see what our best five would be. So, anyways, had a great time there. Good times at that lake, but I didn't want to share that video with you just yet because I'm considering doing the Tawakoni Bass Club tournament that's out there this weekend, and I didn't want to give away my spots because I really feel like that spot is prime for that tournament, and anyway, don't want to give it up. So let's talk about Lake Athens instead, and I'll bring that live video to you sometime, hopefully on Saturday or Sunday. So should be a good one. Lots of frogfish. Anyways, let's jump into Lake Athens. Here we go. Right. So Lake Athens to me is a unique lake. You know, I've been doing a lot of these breakdowns for you guys, and a lot of them have rocks or a lot of laydowns or a lot of boat ramps or something that's significant to it when you look when the water is drawn down. And this lake, Lake Athens, as well as Lake Worth, it's going to be about the same way. I can pull the water down here, you know, go down to 2012, and that's probably the lowest spot and the best image that I can get. But even when I do that, there's not a lot of timber or things like that on this lake. Let me take it back to October here. It's a better image. There's not a lot of timber or things on this lake or underwater structure that I can necessarily pick up on Google Earth. Now, that's not to say that there's not some out here in this lake. There probably is. I'm going to start fishing this lake a lot more. I've fished it 3 or 4 times now, and I really, really like it. So I'm going to continue to go down there and fish it more and hopefully learn more about it and be able to provide you guys some more details. But anyways, I wanted to point that out because this is going to be a totally kind of different breakdown than what you're used to. I'm going to talk more about what I call weed lines. You can call them grass lines. In this lake, it's probably the preferred name is probably a grass line, but I just refer to them all as weed lines. But I think that's going to be your primary method for finding fish in this lake. And my experience just being down there 3 or 4 times, that has definitely been the case. You know, find the weed lines, find the grass lines, find where those breaks are. And that's typically where your fish are. You know, and it's obviously all season depending and stuff like that. So, you know, it's just going to depend on where they're going to be staged at, if they're on these grass lines or back of the cove, secondary points, stuff like that. But anyways, with all that being said, let's just go ahead and start by breaking this down. Now, I'm actually going to do something like I mentioned earlier that's totally different than what we've done in the other videos. Instead of looking at the water when it's drawn down, I'm actually going to take this image and I'm going to take it all the way back up to March of 2017. And the reason for this is because I have the ability to see these grass lines when I do that. And the grass lines on this lake are far more superior than the rocks and stuff like that. You just don't find very many rocks in this lake, and you'll see when we do these breakdowns. So let's just start up here at the marina and let's work our way up the top, and we'll go all the way out to the dam, and then we'll come back around. So as far as the marina goes, you know, you just got the, I believe this is the ramp. No, that's not the ramp at the marina. Took you to the wrong spot. The marina is right here. The marina is right here. Now, as of right now, and you locals, please let me know on this deal, because I know that this is a great spot right back in here, right by the marina where this rock is. And there's also some underwater structure or underwater cover right in here, like some rocks as well. And I think it was Ott Defo that won at one of those tournaments out there, setting right on this spot and just got onto a whole school of them. But the problem is there's some like line that goes across and you can't cross it, or it looks like you can't cross it to go over there anymore. So I'm curious from the people that are locals to this lake, can we still get back there and fish? Can we just pick up our trolling motor and engine and go over that line? I've seen people back there fishing, but I don't know if they're locals that have the docks back in this area and that's why they're over there fishing, or if they just know that they can hop over that line and go fish without getting any trouble. So I would definitely like to know. Because of that, you know, I didn't spend too much time looking back here. Of course, I didn't see too much back in this pocket, other than there's a ramp that's way back in here that you might want to take a look at. So I'm going to move on up from this marina, and then going up from the marina, there's a really good spot that has some lily pads right in these 2 little pockets. So we actually, we caught a few fish in this area last time we were there in the pads. So this would be a good area to take a look at right in here. And there's also some weed lines that are out. There's some weed lines here, you know, you can see them. They're not very significant like some of the other ones we're going to look at. But then over here on these docks, this one interests me as well. Obviously, points always interest me, but this interests me because you've got some pretty good weed lines that are out off of this point, just over there by those docks. So I would definitely work around that area. Try to find those weed lines, try to find where those breaks are and fish around those. And you can pretty much see it throughout the lake. I just marked the major ones, or the ones that were kind of different than everything else. So then moving up here, what I notice is that there's some kind of a underwater point or something going on where that hydrilla has actually come out into the water quite a ways. It comes all the way out here. So I just put a mark out here called grass, just to let you know, hey, this is an area where it looks like the hydrilla is coming way off the bank. You can probably find some weed lines out in here. And this is probably an area where you'd find your bigger fish, your less pressured area, things like that. And then moving up here on this island, the island's really obvious when you're out there. You'll see the island, you can't miss it. But what's maybe not as obvious is the weed lines or the grass lines that surround that entire island. So what I did here was I basically just put a mark in the different areas where that grass line is. I put weed line, WL for weed line, but where that grass line is, and just line up to it, figure out where that grass line is and fish right on the edge of it. And continue to fish on the edge of it, and you'll continue to have a lot of success. Now, that's not saying if you throw up in here and come back, you're not going to catch something, but you're going to catch a lot more if you can stay more parallel with that weed line and punch around the weed line and work swim baits and stuff like that around those weed lines. So this can be a really good area to fish. I'm sure it's probably a hot spot on this lake as well. And then coming up here, one thing I did see that you didn't see too much of is there is a couple stumps right off the edge of this. So if I take it back to October of 2012, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about here. There's just a couple stumps that are over here, and they're just isolated enough to where they caught my attention. There's not a lot of stumps on this lake anyways, or maybe not, I shouldn't say stumps, but there's not a lot of different cover on this lake. It's lily pads and grass. So when you see the stump, it sticks out, and the fact that it's kind of off that point. So maybe just go over there and take a look at it. It looks like a place where some could stage up on. We've also got a ramp that's back in here in this little cove. So I'll scroll in here so you can see it. Interesting things about these ramps is I don't see all those rocks that we typically see around ramps. So the ramps could be good here and they may not be. They are totally different than everything else around it. So that should, bring attention to it, and obviously bring the bait fish and stuff like that around them to allow you to be able to catch those. And then going in up here, if we move on up around this island, I'm going to put this back to 2017 so you can see this weed line. You've actually got a pretty good weed line right here by this dock. Should have probably marked that one. So take a look at that one if you're out there and you're just fishing these weed lines. And then also around this island on the outside, this looks really good. So real good, real defined grass line that's around that island. And then as we move up here, there's a couple different spots that just kind of stick out. They're out here in the middle pretty much. You've got one right here and one here. You've got another one up here as well. So just clumps of grass that are a little bit more isolated, that are kind of out off of the bank. Definitely spots you want to take a look at. And then up here, PD stands for pond dam. And there's actually a pond dam that's in here. So if we draw this back to 2012, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So here's the old pond that's in here. And that pond dam's right up on the side there. So I would say that if you're fishing here, if there's a way that you could get maybe over here and cast this way, or get this way and cast parallel to this pond dam, you're probably going to have a little bit more success that way, especially if they're setting up on that pond dam. So anyways, take a look at it. It could be a good spot to find some fish for sure. I'm going to go back to March, and we're going to pull back out and look and see what's up here. When we get a little bit further up here, way in the back of this thing, you got a pretty decent ditch this back here. So if I pull this back and go back to 2012, you'll see what I'm talking about. Bring this back again. And see how it's really well defined. So you've got pretty good breaks on that ditch as well. It comes out, it's, I call it a ditch. It's probably some little creek or something like that, but it definitely looks interesting to me. And if I bring it up to current, 2017, it looks like, you could be back there and just flip around it and stuff like that. So definitely an area that I would go look at if I was back in this little pocket. And pretty much if you're on Athens, you can fish most of the lake. So you go out and check these things out. These are probably hot spots. Also back in here, you've got a little culvert that you can get back into. Probably pretty shallow back in here, but anytime there's those culverts and stuff, there's usually some rock and stuff around it. There's usually some sort of current coming through it, typically, stuff like that. So they're always good areas to fish. So definitely go back there and take a look at that culvert and see if there's anything back there. And then moving up here, I'm going to have to bring the date back for you guys again. Let's go back to 2012, and I'll show you there's not very many brush piles on this lake, so I want to make sure I can show you these things. This isn't really necessarily a brush pile, but it's kind of a combination of two like stumps or laydowns, or there's a laydown there, there's a couple of stumps and things like that. But it's very unique. There's nothing like it on the lake, or not very many things like that on the lake. So that's probably a good spot to look at for the fish. And then down here, pretty much the same exact thing. There's another brush pile that's kind of hidden down in here. So this is probably a good area to look at as well. Especially considering I don't see a lot of brush, at least from the Google Earth standpoint. I don't see a lot of brush piles. I'm sure there's brush piles in here somewhere, just not sure where they're at. So then moving on down here, we did actually find some rocks. And there's not very many rocks in this lake, but there's some right here. You can see them coming off of this point. And then there's also a little bit right here by this dock, but very shallow rocks for sure. If I bring that up to 2017, you might actually be able to see it a little bit better. So you can see there's a little bit of rocks there. And these rocks are under the water just a little bit. So I would say in this area right in here, if you're trying to get on a rock pattern, it's going to be tough on this lake because there's not a lot of rock, but I would say fish in this area right in here, basically that little tree line. That'd probably be your best bet. And then I'm going to keep moving on down the lake here. And next thing we're looking at is another one of those grass lines, or what I'm labeling as a weed line, but you can see it makes a really nice point out into the lake. So some pretty good deep water access, and it just looks really good. So fish along those weed lines or those grass lines. I think you'll find some pretty good success there. And then if we move up here, we've just got 3 different ramps. We've got a ramp that's out here, a ramp here, and a ramp here. So some good concrete, hard structure compared to all the other things that we're seeing on the lake, which is basically grass and pads. So again, good fish attracting areas, especially if they're personal ramps, they're not getting used a lot and things like that. Let's draw this back to 2014 and just show you how far that ramp goes into the water. So that one goes pretty far in. That one's pretty decent, and that's the shorter one. So these two are probably going to be your better ramps to fish. But let's pull it back, and you can see this one's completely underwater, and that one's got pretty good depth to it. So anyways, if you're on the ramp pattern, there's definitely a few here that you could try. And the thing I like about them is there's not a ton of them, so that makes them a little bit better because they're different than everything else. And then if we get back in here, there's just tons of pads back in these areas. You can get back in all of this. There's pads here. There's all kinds of pads here. We actually went back here. This was our first stop last weekend. I rolled in right here because I wanted to do some frogging, and I think we caught a 3-pounder on like our second or third cast right here. I mean, literally in like a foot of water. So anyways, good area to fish for frogs. Fish the pads with frogs. Right in here, this is also a good pad area too. And then down here, this is just along the dam. There is something down here that caught my attention, and I didn't notice this last weekend we were there. I'll have to go check it out, but there's something down here. I'm not sure what this is, if it's a discharge or what, but obviously with the dam, you might be able to find some rock along the dam. Not heavy riprap or anything like that. They don't really have that, but this is some kind of structure that was down here by the dam. I couldn't tell what it was, but probably something you want to fish around. All right, so I'm going to keep moving down the dam. We get down in this pocket. There's some pads down in here as well. There's some pretty good cover around in here, just lily pads and things like that, but nothing that I could really find to mark for you guys. And then we're going to get back up in here, and we actually have a pretty decent weed line that's right in here. So I don't know if we'll be able to see this for you guys or not. Yeah, you can still see it here on 2014. So you can see this weed line actually comes out, or grass line comes out off this point pretty far out. So I would say, anywhere along that line is going to be a really good area to take a look at for sure. And then if you look here around that boat dock, there's a little cut right here. You can see it here, and there's also a little pond dam or something going on right here. So all good area to look at right through all around that point and things like that. So let's move on up here. Let's look at this other point. We've got another good weed line that's over here. This one you can't see as well in 2014, but if I move this to 2017, you'll see it pretty good. And you'll see people fishing here. I think every time I fish this lake, I've seen people fishing off this point, so it must be a decent point to fish off of. But again, you've got a really good grass line that comes off of that point. And then if you come down here, you pretty much have that grass line the whole way down through here. But then you also have these little grass lines that are a little bit further out from the bank, so they're a little bit different. So definitely want to take a look at those and check those out. And then here again, we've got more weed lines. This kind of makes a really good point that comes out here. So I really liked it. It looks like it sets up well. I like how it's more of a, I guess it's not, I wouldn't really say it's a main lake point, more like a secondary point. So it's really a good spot for them to be stopping at, staging up at, things like that. So they definitely fish around the weed lines and the grass in this area for sure. And then up here, there was a little ditch that's kind of hidden back in here. You can't see it too well. It's a little bit hard to see on the images as well. But if I draw it back to 2012, to October 2012, you can see where this ditch is. It's right here. Now, I don't know, again, I haven't fished this ditch yet. I definitely will, but these are the types of areas that sometimes can be like prime honey holes. They're just not obvious. You know, people just fish right past them. They won't stop and spend 10 or 15 minutes fishing just that ditch, and they're probably missing the mother load of fish that are right in here. So if you're out here fishing Athens, I could be wrong. You could pull up this ditch and catch nothing, but these are the types of spots that you really look for, the ones that are just pretty much right in front of everybody's face, but they don't realize that their boat's probably, you know, somewhere in here and they're going right over the top of it and they're just barely touching the ditch after 2-3 casts and then they move on. So take a look at the ditch. It could be a good spot to look at. See, we also talked about some weed lines up in here. So very similar to that last point we looked at, very significant weed lines coming off of this point. So I really like that. You got some pretty decent ones here as well, but this one just didn't look as good as this one. But still, this is probably it's a main lake point with some hydrilla around it. It's got to be decent. And then I think this is really the community hole of all community holes for Lake Athens, and that is these grass lines that surround this golf course point. So you'll see people fishing out here a lot. So just find the edges of these weed lines. I tried to mark them for you the best I could. Obviously, they're going to fluctuate year to year as they grow, but they should be pretty close. So if you get to these points, it should get you close to those weed lines to where either you can fish around it and feel your way to the edge of the weed line, or you can use your electronics if you have them to really identify where those weed lines are. But I went ahead and marked those all for you on that golf course point. And again, this is a community hole, really good place to fish. I've caught some really decent fish in that area for sure. And then going back in here, didn't see too much going on in here. There was another ramp that was over here all by itself. So I guess if you're on that ramp pattern, you could come in here. Pretty much all the bank line on this lake is awesome. I think you could just frog fish all day and just have a heyday on Lake Athens. So it's not like you're going to struggle to find fish here. You're going to have a great time on this lake. It's a really good lake to fish. You know, bust out your swim baits, bust out your frogs, go out and actually get on a little bit deeper diving crankbait and get on the edge of that golf course pond that we talked about and get on the edge of that weed line, and you'll be surprised at some of the size of the fish that you'll be able to catch out there. So anyways, definitely a lot shorter breakdown than what you guys are used to. I'll put these out on the Simplistic Square site so you can have access to these points. Please go out there and check them out. If you want the SD card, you can order those, or you can get the digital file too. We'll offer those as well. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. We truly appreciate the support and appreciate the growth that we've been getting. Our next video, we're going to dive into the offshore hotspots for Lake Athens, and then we'll wrap this one up and move on to the next lakes, which I think we've got Joe Pool, Lake Worth, and Purtis Creek. So lots of good stuff coming, guys. Appreciate all the support and tight lines.